Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church. Glad to be with you this morning. It's a wonderful day here. A little on the snowy side, but it's a wonderful day. It's always a wonderful day when God's at work and we can see that. And during this Christmas season, I hope you've seen God at work. Or if you haven't, you will soon. And I want to continue my story or my theme here of coming to Christmas and getting back in Luke chapter 1, the story with Zechariah and Elizabeth. And we see here in verse 57 these words. When it's time for Elizabeth's baby to be born, she gave birth to a son. And when her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had been very merciful to her, everyone rejoiced with her. When the baby was 8 days old, they all came to the circumcision ceremony. They wanted to name him Zechariah after his father. But Elizabeth said, "No, his name is John." "What?" they explained. "There is no one in all your family by that name." So they used gestures to ask the baby's father what he wanted to name him. He motioned for a writing tablet, and to everyone's surprise, he wrote down, "His name is John." And immediately, Zechariah could speak again, and he began to praise God. Well, this drama began when the angel spoke to Zechariah and said, "You're going to have a son." Actually, kind of spoke earlier, but it began in its intensity when that happened, and he didn't believe, like I talked about yesterday, and he was therefore unable to speak as a result of his disbelief. So today we read the time when John is born, or the baby's born. And there are a couple of really neat things in here. The first one is right in the beginning. And when the time came for her baby to be born, her neighbors and relatives heard that the Lord had been very merciful to her, and everyone rejoiced with her. You know, when God does something and we let people know about it, others will rejoice. We encourage others by our actions and our testimonies as to what God has done. And the whole purpose of God working in our lives is not just for our benefit, it's that for sure. He wants us to live fulfilled lives, but it's also to share what He's done with other people. So those who haven't experienced His goodness will get an opportunity to hear about it. And so it says here, all the friends and neighbors, all the folks around, they rejoiced. They were so excited. Indeed, they had finally had a child. So then they go on, it says, got 8 days old, and they go for the circumcision ceremony. In Jewish days, at 8 days, you would circumcise the males. They still do that today in most cases. A lot of people don't follow that in the general culture anymore, but they still do, and it was a big deal. When that baby was circumcised, that was a way of saying, this child is a member of our community of faith. Now, later on, that child would have to declare it him or herself, but this was a big deal. And so it was also the time when you would name the baby. Now, today, people give children, babies, some really different names. And they don't usually mean something like in times past. They're just names that we like, or they sound good, or we just think they'd be nice. But in times past, the name meant something of itself. And the tradition was that when you had a son, the son would take the father's name. That kind of told you what family you came from, the lineage, and it was a very, very strong tradition. And in these days, tradition really mattered. So, in any case, they circumcise him and they want to name him Zachariah. I can almost see the guy getting ready to pronounce his name as Zechariah. And Elizabeth speaks up with great emotion. Oh, no, 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 don't you do that. His name is John. And almost everybody would stop and say, what? How can you do that? How can you do that? You can't name him that. Well, Elizabeth by herself would not have been able to stop them from naming him Zechariah. And we don't understand this part of it, but once the kid is named, you can't change it. And so they turn to Zechariah, who still can't speak. He's been all this time, he can't speak. Bless his heart. He's been struggling trying to communicate. So it says here that he gestured for a tablet to write down something, and he puts down here his name is John, and everybody is shocked. But they go along with it, and then even more crazily, Zechariah is now able to speak. You see, when we're following God's plan, things work out pretty good. And even if they don't work out the way we wanted them to, or we thought they would, they still work out pretty good. And the rest of the story tells us how wonderful John turned out to be. And he had to be that way because the scriptures had to be fulfilled. So when we look at this story, I'd like to ask you, how are you doing in fulfilling God's plan for your life? Are you doing pretty good? Are you barely doing any good? Or are you just flat out not getting anywhere? Doesn't matter where you are. What matters is where you're heading towards. And so what I'd really like is for you to think about it in these next few days. As we come to Christmas, what's the purpose of the baby? Why did God go to all this much trouble? He really loves you. He really does. And he invites you to put your hand in his hand and walk with him through life. I'm sure glad I did that a long time ago. I've had to shall we say, re-emphasize that from time to time. And I hope you'll do the same. This Christmas, may the blessings and the joy of Jesus touch your heart as much as the birth of John touched the heart of Zechariah and Elizabeth. Well, thanks for listening. If you have a prayer concern or a need, let us know. We'll do everything we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. Thanks for listening. Until next time, God bless you. I'll talk to you again.